Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, bribers, vibers and Substack subscribers, welcome along to the Joe Spivey YouTube channel where we discuss books and little else. And boy oh boy oh boy, you really did believe, did you not folks, in your infinite ignorance that I had exhausted all of the genre-based options for YouTube videos? Well, I come at you today with a different one in kind once more. The majority of this video will not be dominated by my eminently punchable face, nor my opinionated drivel. I've recorded not an audio book, but an audio essay / audio piece / audio column for your auricular delectation, folks. So I am just going to talk for 3 or 4 minutes about the content of the piece. But yesterday, or I think maybe even the day before that, I uploaded to Substack a continuation, another installation of a series which I have set in motion a little while ago, concerning the wild, weird, and what shall we say, racially intolerant worlds of 1970s and 80s British sitcoms. If indeed you are already a subscriber to my Substack, the link indeed will be down below. A paying subscriber will have read my piece on Only Fools and Horses, which is culturally synonymous with Great Britain, and indeed the mucky, unconnected and untechnologised eras of the 1970s and the 80s and the 90s. And I've done a new one today focusing on Granada's smaller but what I term briefly superb series Rising Damp, which took place I think between 74 and ran for 4 series to about 78 or 79, starring Leonard Rossiter, Francis de la Tour, Don Waddington and Richard Beckinsale. And so yeah, I've done a 1,500-word Substack piece, and rather than just let it exist there, dormant and utterly unappreciated, I thought that I would read it out, and with the virtues of modern technology, I've created a slideshow to run in the background, so that the subjects and characters that I am eviscerating and perhaps analysing in a little bit of a highbrow fashion can be moved across the screen as you hear my dulcet tones. So that's jolly fun. So I'll talk for another 2 or 3 minutes, and then I will let you have it. So what am I doing elsewhere at the moment? Of course, I'm wearing my deck chair t-shirt, or at least what many family members have been importunate enough to describe as my deck chair t-shirt, as though I've ambled onto Brighton Beach at midnight, happened upon a happy couple, upturned them from their deck chair, stripped the cloth contents and stitched myself something of a garment. I will admit that it's a strange pattern, but I think highlights my ceaseless idiosyncrasies. What else am I doing at the moment? I am reading John le Carré's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy for Dr. November. We are still in November, folks, and so I am participating in a book event originated on the channel of Mark at A Book Time with Elvis. I do believe, though I could be incorrect. I am very willing to be corrected on that assertion. I am 2/3 of the way through and am loving it. I will get into further detail in another video. As it is, folks, I think this will probably do. So without any more faffing, I give you the finest and funniest sitcom that you have never heard of by the name of Rising Damp, read by Joseph Edward Spivey, Esquire.
I'm sorry that these pimpled entries have not been hitting your inboxes with the regularity agreed many months ago, folks, but my silence can be excused. Me and my illustrious team were thwacked by fate's petty paddle and forced to reorganise ourselves after a chain reaction of events came in to thwart our humble tenets. First, we ran into trouble with the monogassed Border Security Force, who responded with the usual petulance and peremptoriness when, woe of all woes, my supersonic private jet was found to have flown without the requisite licence and accreditations, thus bamboozling those whose job it is to track the blinking green dots in humid radar stations. This meant we were late for the annulment of my marriage to the Anglo-Swedish tennis-playing hypermodel Svetlana Morris, which in turn meant my ballroom proposal to the Greco-Cuban oil heiress Penelope Garcia was delayed, which, as the bossy tabloids made abundantly clear, delayed my purchasing of the fine New York brownstone, which has cluttered my thoughts for a strenuous decade. Add to this the unthinkable turmoil of placing only second in the European phallus-coptering gala, and the removal of my Nobel Prize on the grounds that such outstanding work must have been the product of disqualifying teamwork, and you have been given the merest semblance of my most irksome recent past. Now that my affairs are in order, and I have been declared chief phallus-copterer in my region, if not in my continent, I can broach the silly business of Substack writing. Before the world's antipathy inflicted harm upon harm, I was paying homage to the British sitcoms that amused a prissy, hedge-trimming nation throughout the 70s and 80s. Last time we discussed John Sullivan's Only Fools and Horses and the cultural totems therein. But a viewer needn't reacquaint themselves with Only Fools because the show is a stalwart of television scheduling, and its lines are aped and adapted across smoggy markets and Technicolor tower blocks from sea to shining sea. It falls to a writer like myself, one obsessed with nuance and quiddity, to evince the virtues of some statistically less popular sitcoms whose mirthful strangeness never came to dominate the zeitgeist, but sitcoms that nevertheless hold their own between the screen's four borders. So let us untether our hips from the televised mainstream and soar into some less chronicled currents. You folks know how eagerly I seek the headlines, so it will not surprise you to hear me declare Granada's briefly superb Rising Damp the finest sitcom you've never heard of. Leonard Rossiter stars as the lecherous landlord Rigsby, who coasts about the grime-decaled house, wearing holes into his slippers and pouncing on the emergent shibboleths of his new world. He is metaphysically aghast at the two university students, Alan and Philip, on the top floor, and emotionally awed by the lugubrious and scatty spinster Miss Jones across the hall. Aside from the peripheral characters' momentary bursts, the paratrooper Spooner, the scantily clad model Brenda, a pious conservative politician, a hypochondriacal wimp Osborne, and the ever-misplaced cat Vienna, Rigsby, Miss Jones, Alan and Philip comprise the series' comic bulk. There are so many subtleties and wider world applications to the episodes that an acknowledgement of the raw, untrammelled humour can seem somehow cheap or short-sighted. And yet, the moralistic tendencies cannot possibly be wedged into place without the soulful belly laughs providing the initial aperture. From the inception to the show's disappearance, between prosaic boyfriends and chain-rattling ex-wives, in rosy defiance of all rational thought, Rigsby is innocently besotted with Miss Jones. So besotted that he will burn Lovewood for her, box a burly undergraduate for her, self-stupefy on prenatal medication for her, purchase a puerile sports coupe for her, feign artistic familiarity for her, and anything more farcical that might occur to writer Eric Chappell's powerful pen. "My God, Miss Jones," does he say when hearing of her intentions to vote for the Labour Party. "My God, Miss Jones," does he say as he sees her pertly accoutred in a yellow singlet, submitting to modern exercise fads. Rare fans of Rising Damp might have twitched at my adverb innocently in reference to Rigsby's love. I'm perfectly willing to admit that his ugly smile and his phallocentric view of the world could, in a lesser man's case, be held as evidence of Miss Jones's patriarchal objectification. But with that being said, Rigsby's boyish uselessness, the panting, the verbal errancy, the daft stunts intended to attract, shows Rigsby as a dog chasing a car. He wouldn't know how to cherish the object of his desperate pursuit if ever it was placed into his clammy hands. Add to this his ostensible hatred of the sexual expressiveness and corner shop prurience, and we have, we hope, an inveterate pantheoniser of Miss Jones who would kiss the ground on which she walked for a century's marriage. A few flights up the stairs takes us to the shared bedroom of Alan and Philip. One fact that must be known is Philip's status as, heaven forfend, a black man. To someone of Rigsby's blinkered prejudice, Philip is churlishly, preposterously, unmannerly black. To make matters even worse, Philip has just stepped off a plane from Africa, with tribal lettering and a batch of wives to further his noble savage application. Here is the point at which my 21st century brethren would bridle at such a representation and the lamentably bigoted nature of Rigsby's teasing. The blue-haired humorlessness of modern clicktivism would have the racist script reduced to cinders and Leonard Rossiter's character sectioned without trial. Any similarly squeamish tyrants are hereby advised either to click off this document or begin your disembarkation from the Joe Spivey Substack immediately. I do not favour the cancellation of Rising Damp or the fumigation of Rigsby's pungent lines. As I'm sure Eric Chappell knew only too well, there is a didactic utility to Rigsby's racism. Whilst he chides and dehumanises Philip, horridly comparing him to a primitive woodland warrior, Rigsby's horrendous and atavistic worldview is always shown as the erroneous abomination that it is. Philip is just as well versed in this nation's language, literature and farinaceous breakfasts as Rigsby is, and thus quite often the volcanic racism is nothing but a vehicle through which Philip can intellectually infantilise the wretched discrimination. Why do we not openly detest Rigsby for these unconscionable comments? Well, we are able to shoulder this malevolence and, as we do with fading grandparents and boggling uncles, appreciate other redeeming features. Given the adequate screen time, Rigsby's initial loathing matures into an affection as strong for this son of a chief as he exhibits for the whitest of white Yorkshiremen. If anything, Rigsby sees Philip's roommate Alan as an equally dangerous force within the household and the wider society. With his Jaggerian roof of cascading hair and his youthful Marxian iconoclasm, Alan presents another emblematic affront to the gin-sipping, house-owning cornucopia whose merits Rigsby needs to champion. This rictus of disgust burrows into the landlord's face as Alan praises Mao, Che Guevara, short skirts, earrings, deodorant, bath salts and permissive sexual standards. But again, when Alan flees from the father of an insulted lover, Rigsby turns the former on his heels with a fiery riposte. Whenever the two work-shy dolts upstairs are languid, their prospects scuppered by celebrity fanaticism and third-rate cannabis, Rigsby comes to their comedic rescue in times of anxious need or shapeless lassitude. Never mind how much asperity tinges their dialogue, this unlikely three are each deeply thankful for the presence of the other two. So there you have it, folks. A reclusive and ideologically sclerotic man with a penchant for quick wit fighting modernity's unwaftable swarm. Two mediocre yobs trying to disassemble free market capitalism upstairs, and the unloved woman, secretly desperate for a shunt up her sitter, botching steak pies below. If you are to begin watching Rising Damp soon, then I have 3 possible take-off points to recommend. If you're keen to grasp Rigsby's charming appeal as a raconteur and jibe spitter, then Food, Glorious Food will suffice. There, Rigsby is fronted with a 48-hour fast that results in him scoffing some foul fare. Things That Go Bump in the Night sees Rigsby convinced of a supernatural presence, and Night Out gives Eric Chappell permission to send his foursome to a local restaurant where Rigsby bowderises his Second World War gallantry behind cigar fumes.